American Film Institute named Up as one of the top 10 films of 2009. Up earned 5 nominations at the 82nd Academy Awards, winning 2 for Best Animated Feature and Best Original Score, and also received numerous accolades. Up is a wonderful film, with characters who are as believable as any characters can be, who spend much of their time floating above the rainforests of Venezuela. They have tempers, problems and obsessions. It begins with a romance as sweet and lovely two children named Carl and Ellie meet and discover they share the same dream of someday being explorers. A daring adventurer named Charles Muntz, who uses his gigantic airship to explore a lost world on a plateau in Venezuela, and then bring back the bones of fantastic creatures previously unknown to man. When his discoveries are accused of being faked, he flies off enraged to South America again, vowing to bring back living creatures to prove his claims. But then nothing is heard from him for years. Ellie and Carl grow up, have a courtship, marry, buy a ramshackle house, where they first met, and turn it into their dream home. Their marriage is blissful and they get jobs as a balloon salesman and zookeeper, respectively. When they discover that Ellie is unable to have children, they make a pact to save money to travel to Paradise Falls in South America. They decided to save up some money, but life keeps getting in the way. Car problem with a tire blows out. Carl breaks his leg, a tree crashes into the house, and breaks the roof during a storm, force them continually dip into their savings. Then they make a heartbreaking discovery. Carl and Ellie grow old together, working at a zoo selling balloons and giving tours respectively. One day, while cleaning the house, an elderly Carl realizes that, despite living happily together, they never fulfilled their old promise, and decides to surprise Ellie on a picnic with tickets to South America. However, Ellie's declining health puts her in the hospital, and she eventually passes away, leaving Carl alone. Carl remains in his home, a retired and sour recluse. As the city grows around him, he is encouraged to move to a retirement home due to increased construction, but often argues with the foreman and refuses to leave. One day, he meets Russell, a young wilderness explorer scout who attempts to assist Carl in order to earn his assisting the elderly badge. When a construction worker accidentally breaks Carl's mailbox, a part of the house, and a part of Ellie that Carl cherishes, Carl hits him over the head with his walker. The assault lands him in court, where he is forced to move out of his home by the next day. Workers from Shady Oaks retirement home arrive to pick him up the following morning, but are shocked to find Carl releasing millions of helium balloons into the air, lifting it over the city and into the sky. Comfortably away from the city, Carl sets a course for South America, and rests in his chair until he interrupted by a knock at the door. Upon answering, he discovers Russell hanging on to dear life on his porch. Carl lets him in and decides to descend to return Russell home before a severe storm hits. The house is knocked around in the turbulence, but Carl manages to tie most of his items down before falling asleep. He's woken the next morning by Russell. The fog lifts to reveal that they are standing on a high plateau opposite Paradise Falls. Meanwhile, a chase is progressing in the jungle. 3 dogs with red lights on their collars are in hot pursuit of what appears to be a giant bird. But they lose the trail when their sensitive ears pick up the fine tuning of Carl's hearing aid. Russell stops to go to the toilet, and happens upon a giant bird which he lures closer with a chocolate bar. He introduces the colorful creature to Carl and gives it the name Kevin. They meet a tall, colorful bird called Kevin. They also met a dog named Doug, who wears a special collar that allows him to speak too. Eventually, the dog pack finds Carl and his crew and takes them back to their master, surprised that their master is Muntz, and that creature he's been chasing all these years is none other than Kevin. Muntz invites them into the Spirit of Adventure as guests, but his behavior soon turns hostile when he finds out that Russell has adopted a new pet bird, which is the one he's been finding all these years. Muntz then decided to capture Kevin. Carl and Russell run away from the Zeppelin, riding on Kevin's back and assisted by Doug. They barely escape capture by Muntz's dogs, though Kevin is injured in the process. Carl agrees to help Kevin get back to her babies safely. But, just before Kevin can re-enter her labyrinth home, a net flies out and captures her. Muntz throws a lantern beneath Carl's home, setting fire to it. Carl ignores Kevin and runs over to extinguish the flames as Muntz takes Kevin on board and leaves. Carl goes inside the house and sits down to look at Ellie's adventure book. Saddened that she never got to see the falls, he is about to close it when he discovers added pictures near the end, documenting their life together. On the last page is a note written by Ellie, that encouraging Carl to have a new adventure now that she's gone. Muntz captures Kevin. Carl and Russell run for it. They make it to Paradise Falls, but Russell is supremely bummed that Carl let Muntz nab Kevin. He decides to go back and save his birdie buddy. Carl zooms after Russell in his house, with his house tethered nearby. Carl and Muntz duke it out on Muntz's airship, and Carl rescues Russell, Kevin, and Doug. Carl's house is cut loose in the struggle and drifts away, which slowly descends into the clouds. A loss which Carl accepts as being for the best. Muntz plummets to his death. Kevin is returned to her 3 chicks, and Carl takes Russell and Doug home, where Russell attends his senior explorer ceremony. Carl stands in for Russell's deadbeat dad at Russell's Wilderness Explorer ceremony. Carl fulfills the role and gives Russell a grape soda badge that Ellie gave him when they first met, calling it the Ellie badge. Afterwards, they sit on a curb together in front of an ice cream shop, Carl acting as a surrogate grandfather to Russell, the Spirit of Adventure anchored above them. At Paradise Falls, Carl and Ellie's house has landed right at the spot where it was meant to be, on the cliff overlooking the falls, just like Ellie wanted. The most touching on this film is to see the love of Carl and Ellie, alive even after her death and visible in the way he keeps her memory alive and ever present. Russell's goodness also moves us, especially when he is confronted with the harsh ways of stubborn Carl, who sees in Russell a problem. Another deeply moving character is Doug, a friendly and affectionate dog who speaks through a device placed on his leash. It shows the difficulties that people face when trying to move on, as well as the challenges they will have if they don't. But the lasting impact from this film is that everyone has the capability to accept their past, no matter how impossible it may seem. If love cannot move mountains, can still move homes, and that no one is too old to live an adventure or fulfill a dream. After watching and analyzing the movie, we learn that we should accept the reality that your loved one has passed away. No matter how depressed you are, you should move on. Yes, at the beginning, you find it very hard to do so. However, life still goes on. Another thing is that we can't predict what will happen in the future. We have to embrace ourselves to face the challenges. So, from this movie, we have to be prepared for the reality and challenges faced. The end.